All right, are we ready to proceed with the prosecution's case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, please proceed whenever you're ready.
Prosecution calls Kennedy Leon to the stand. May we proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, proceed whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Ms. Leon. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Good morning. My name is Kennedy Leon.
And could you tell us a bit about yourself?
There's not much to know, really. I was born here in Scarborough, and I live with my sister McKenna down on Elm Street.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I took a job at Chili's here a while back, and while our sizzling shrimp fajitas are fantastic, the pay, it really isn't. I had to pick up some odd jobs here and there in order to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table.
What odd jobs?
I used to sell marijuana. I'm not proud of it, but it's how I used to make a living. Thankfully, with the new Panera opening up, I've been able to take a safer career path.
All right, Ms. Leon, I'd like to talk to you about how you used to make your sales. Who are your clients?
I did most of my sales at college parties. After a few drinks, people don't exactly pay attention to if you're giving them a fair deal. It's where the green can, really get you some green, if you know what I'm saying. But, I also had my regulars, like platypus, elk, and badger.
Ma'am, you sold marijuana to animals?
No, so sorry for the confusion. No, I gave my clients code names to use when they contacted me. I love animals, so I decided to name my regulars after the animal that they reminded me of. I even called them my little ganja groupies.
And who were these ganja groupies?
Let's see here. I called Hudson hamster, Rebecca rabbit, Sarah was salamander, and then we always had a badger.
And who was Badger?
It used to be good old Ronnie. He would always frustrate me based on how many questions he would ask, but looking back on it now, he was a pretty good guy. Sadly, Ronnie passed away in a car accident May of 2020. Then the name was then passed down.
And who is the name passed down to?
Blake Hart, Ronnie's friend. 2 or 3 other people tried to contact me trying to go by that name as well, but I wouldn't let them. I knew that Ronnie and Blake were close, so I made sure only Blake could contact me using that name. And since Blake would always use a private number, it was fairly easy to tell when it was her.
And when was the last time you heard from Badger?
On March 14th. I have to admit, I was a bit surprised that she reached out to me, considering we hadn't exactly ended on the best of terms later that past February.
What happened in February?
Blake messaged me as Badger, like she always did, and organized a meetup. But when we got there, she started screaming at me. Blake yelled about how money was tight and then accused me of ripping her off. Then she threatened me.
And how did Blake Hart threaten you?
She shot this menacing look at me and said that bad things happen to shady dealers. Then she got up and left without a word.
All right, Miss Leon, do you know why you're here today?
Well, let's just say that bad things definitely happened to me. On March 14th, the next time I had heard from Blake, I was robbed at gunpoint.
Now, let's walk through that day. When did you hear from Blake?
At around 11:30, I got a text from a private number that identified themselves as Badger. So I then knew it was Blake.
And would you recognize a copy of those text messages if I showed them to you today?
Yes, I would.
Let the record reflect that I'm screen sharing what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 3. Now, Miss Leon, what is this document?
These are the text messages that Blake and I sent back and forth on March 14th, and they're why we even ended up meeting in the park that day.
Your Honor, the prosecution moves to enter Exhibit 3 into evidence. Pursuant to Stipulation 1, both parties agree that the exhibit is authentic and accurate.
Any objections from the defense?
No objections.
Okay, it is so entered.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Leon, could you walk us through those messages?
Sure. As you can see, Blake, or Badger, messaged me asking to buy an ounce of marijuana. I then proposed LaRue Park as our meeting place, and Blake agreed to meet me there.
And what did you do after receiving those messages?
Well, I grabbed my stuff and headed out to the park. I got there around 5 minutes or so before noon.
And what stuff did you have on you that day?
Oh, let's see here. I had my phone, a plastic bag of marijuana, and quite a bit of cash on me. I kept $700 in my shoe and $500 in my pocket. I always try and split up my cash in case I get robbed, and lo and behold, it did happen.
All right, now what happened at noon?
A person walked by wearing a bulky black coat and a dark gray hoodie, all cinched up in order to cover their face. You couldn't even see their face, so I called out Blake to make sure that I had the right person.
And how did the person respond?
They nodded and walked over to me. At that point, I saw that they were Blake's height, and when Blake opened her mouth, it sounded just like her. Given that, and since Blake is the only person who I told where I would be, I was confident that it was her.
And what happened after Blake came over to you?
Blake tried to artificially deepen their voice. It almost sounded like they were trying to do a really, really bad Batman impression. By that point, I could tell that something was up. So I just handed over the bag of marijuana to try and get the whole thing over with as quickly as possible.
And what happened after you handed Blake the marijuana?
Blake fumbled around in her coat pocket, and when I thought she was pulling out money, she pulled out a gun. She pointed it right at me, finger on the trigger.
And what happened next?
I was terrified. Blake demanded that I give her all of the money I had in my pockets, and I handed over to her as quickly as I could. I just didn't want to die.
And what happened after you handed the money over to the defendant?
Blake kept pointing the gun at me and told me to stand against the bathroom wall and to count to 100. At that point, I was so shaken, I couldn't count, I could barely breathe. I just stood there praying that Blake wouldn't shoot me. I didn't even budge until after the police had arrived.
Thank you, Ms. Leon. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination for this witness. I think you're on mute.
Sorry.
There you go.
Can I go ahead, Your Honor, with my cross-examination?
Yes, proceed whenever you're ready, Ms. Pritchard.
Mrs. Lyon, isn't it true that you dropped out of high school at the age of 18?
Yes, in order to take care of my sister.
And you started dealing drugs shortly after you failed. You failed shortly after you failed to maintain active employment, correct?
Yes.
Would you say that your friends' choices led you to your involvement in criminal activity?
I guess you could say that.
Would you agree that drug dealing is a dangerous activity?
Yes, for sure.
You stated in your affidavit that you personally know a couple of people who were killed in your drug dealing, correct?
Yes, like we said earlier, it can be a very, very dangerous job.
Despite this knowledge, you still chose to engage in drug dealing, correctly?
Yes, I'm not proud of it, but it's how I made a living back then.
You previously testified that the codename Badger had been used prior to your contact with Miss Hart, correct?
Yes, it originally belonged to good old Ronnie.
Do you have any way to know that the codename Badger was not in use after you stopped selling drugs to Mrs. Hart?
I mean, I have no way to know for sure, but I know that Badger was the name given to Blake Hart after it had been used by good old Ronnie.
Mrs. Lyon, you previously testified that the person who robbed you was wearing a gray hoodie and a bulky coat. Were there any other identifiable features that you saw?
Yes, I could recognize Blake's height, and Blake was the only other person that I even told that I would be at the park that day.
At the time that you were arrested, isn't it true that you had a felony warrant for marijuana trafficking?
Yes.
Isn't it also true that you did not mention the robbery until after Officer Grant placed you under arrest?
I mean, yes. However, at the time I was a drug dealer. I wasn't just going to walk up to a cop and tell them my whole life story.
And isn't it true that you accepted a plea deal in today's case?
Yes, that is true. However, I was robbed, so I guess you could say that that is why I'm here today.
Mrs. Lyon, as of today, are you currently employed?
No, not necessarily.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Does the prosecution have anything further for this witness?
No redirect necessary, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Leon, you are free to step down, and prosecution may call its next witness.
Your Honor, prosecution calls Rory Butler to the stand. May we proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, Ms. Kim, proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Good morning. My name is Rory Butler.
And what do you do for a living, Ms. Butler?
I'm a park maintenance employee at LaRue Park. I've been working there for about 25 years now.
And what are your job duties as a park maintenance employee?
It's my job to keep LaRue looking clean, trim the grass, clean the tables, clear the slides of leaves and such. Nothing too exciting, but it pays the bills.
And do you know why you're here today, Ms. Butler?
Yeah, I witnessed a drug deal on March 14th.
Let's walk through that day. Where were you on the morning of March 14th?
I was at LaRue making rounds that morning. Some college kids had a mess the night before, so I was busy picking up discarded beer cans and recycling them. And then after a while, I decided to go to the park vending machines and grab some coffee. They have those like Starbucks cold brews, a little too sweet, but they keep me awake.
And did you see anything when you got to the vending machine?
Well, when I first got there, I kept trying to put my $2 in, but the machine kept spitting it out. And then I saw a person standing awkwardly around the bathrooms about 25, maybe 30 feet away.
Do you know who that person was?
I recognize him from selling marijuana in my park in the past, but I didn't know their name at the time, but I now know that it was Miss Kennedy Leone.
And what was Miss Leone doing?
She was looking at her phone. I wasn't too sure what she was up to, so I decided to hide behind the vending machines just to keep an eye out.
And did you see anything while you hid behind the vending machines?
Yeah, this person came out of nowhere and just walked right up to Leone, and they were covered from head to toe in clothing.
Could you tell us what that person was wearing?
Sure. They were wearing a bulky black coat and a zip-up hoodie, and the hoodie was cinched up so tight that I couldn't even see their face. And then there's a hole in the side of it, in the abdomen area, and that was pretty distinctive.
Now, what happened as this hooded figure approached Miss Leone?
Miss Leone called out Badger, like they were asking for a name, and then the person nodded in response. I mean, I think that's a pretty funny name for a person.
What did Miss Leone do after meeting Badger?
She pulled out a clear plastic bag with something green inside. I figured it was just probably marijuana. So I was like, okay, it's a drug deal, called 911 immediately. And then as I was doing that, Sawyer Scott walked by.
And what was Sawyer Scott doing?
It was kind of strange. Sawyer's always like running around the park, but that day she wasn't. She was slowly walking through the park. I was focused on the drug deal, but she just appeared unconcerned. And she glanced over and then kept on keeping on.
Did you see anything else happen that day?
Yeah. As I was watching Miss Leone and the Badger person, they just parted ways out of nowhere. And the Badger person ran right past where I was and scared the heck out of me, but luckily they didn't see me.
Now, Miss Butler, I'd like to clarify a few things. Did you ever see Badger pay Miss Leone for whatever was in that clear plastic bag?
No, I did not.
Did you ever see Badger pull out a gun?
I couldn't tell you. They were facing away from me. So if they were pointing a gun at Miss Leone, I wouldn't have seen it. But what Miss Leone did next made me think that something was kind of off.
What did Miss Leone do?
Well, she went right up to the bathroom wall and then just stood there. And she was still head resting against the wall, just doing nothing. And I guess I'd know what happened now, but at the time I was just beyond confused.
And finally, Miss Butler, did you speak to the police that day?
Yeah, an officer arrived pretty soon after, and I tried my best to help him out. I told him about the drug deal, Badger, and led him right to Miss Leone.
Thank you, Miss Butler. No further questions, Your Honor.
Does the defense have a cross-examination for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you can proceed whenever you're ready.
Mrs. Butler, on March 14th, 2021, around close to noon, you saw someone close to the park restrooms, correct?
Yes.
But you had to squint to see who it was, correct?
They were 25 feet away, so I was looking pretty hard at them.
And Lion was just looking at his phone, correct?
Yes.
And you witnessed Lion calling out to someone saying Badger?
Yeah, this person walked up just covered in clothes and she called out Badger.
But you can't be sure that he said Badger, correct?
Yes? No?
And
It was
I'm sorry.
it was Badger.
And the individual that approached Lion, you could not determine their gender
They were clothes, so no.
or their facial features
Their hoodie was cinched up tight.
or hear what they were discussing.
The wind was howling that day. Kentucky weather's crazy.
And while watching Lion, you also saw Sawyer Scott pass by,
Yeah.
but you did not notify police of seeing Sawyer Scott.
She just walked by like nothing was going on. And I was so focused on the drug deal. I was excited about that. So I told the cops about everything I saw with them.
And you remembered that you had not told the police of Sawyer Scott when Mrs. McCreary visited you, correct?
Yeah, she was just asking for more information. I gave her a park map.
But you still never contacted Officer Grant, correct?
No.
And you stated you guessed Lion was counting money when he was facing the wall of the restrooms.
He was standing there.
But you were not actually sure what was happening.
I was confused.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Does the prosecution have anything further for their witness?
No redirect necessary, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Butler, you are free to step down and the prosecution may call their third witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the Commonwealth calls Officer Grant to the stand.
All right, and proceed whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Good morning. I'm Officer Dakota Grant.
And where do you work, Officer Grant?
I work for the Scarsville Police Department, or SPD for short, and I've worked there for about 6 years now.
What are your duties as an officer?
Well, as an officer, it's my job to respond to the scenes when crimes are called in. I drive around in my squad car until it's time to take reports and collect evidence. I'm also a detective in training, and I was given permission by my chief to take on the role in today's case.
What do you do as a detective?
I mostly just follow up on information gathered by officers, so I really have seen this case through from start to finish. I've worked on a number of cases as a detective, but this is my first violent robbery case.
All right, Officer Grant, I'd like to talk about today's case. Can you explain to the members of the jury why we are here today?
Of course, I was the responding officer and detective in today's case. I responded to a call about potential drug transaction in Little River Park on March 14th and investigated Ms. Kenny Leon's claim that she had been robbed at gunpoint.
Could you walk us through that day?
Yeah, I can. I got my coffee from Dunkin' and started patrol around 8 a.m., just like any other day. Normally, I'd have my police pup Bobby with me, but he was on potential leave at the time. And then I received a call from Little Park around noon.
And what did you do after you received this call?
I drove right over to the park and made contact with the 911 call, Miss Roy Butler. Miss Butler then led me to Miss Kenny Leon, who she identified as one of the two people she saw in a potential drug transaction.
What did you do after Kennedy Leon was identified?
I went up to talk to Miss Leon and she was acting strangely. She was just standing against the bathroom wall and appeared to be quite nervous. She was violently shaking and look, there was no disco music playing. And at that point, I tried to calm her down and just talk to her.
What did you tell her?
Well, I first followed procedure by identifying myself as an officer, and then asked Miss Leon if she needed any help. She just shook me off, so I proceeded to collect her ID, and then found that she had an outstanding warrant for her arrest, so I placed her under arrest and seized her phone.
And what happened when you placed Miss Leon under arrest?
Well, as I moved to place her under arrest, she got very upset. She was crying and telling me that I got the wrong person. Miss Leon informed me that she had just been robbed at gunpoint by an individual named Blake Hart.
And how did this impact your investigation, Officer Grant?
Well, this took our investigation from just a small little distribution of marijuana to an armed robbery, which is something we take very seriously. Then I took statements from Miss Leon and Miss Butler and obtained a search warrant to look through Miss Leon's phone.
First, let's talk about that phone. What did you do after you received the warrant?
I went through Miss Leon's messages and I found a series of texts between Miss Leon and an individual named Badger.
Would you recognize a copy of those messages if I showed them to you today?
Absolutely.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I am screen sharing what has been previously entered as Exhibit 3. Now, Officer Grant, how did these messages impact your investigation?
Well, as you can see, these messages indicated that the person meet and possibly robbed Miss Leon in Rue Park went by the alias of Badger. And at that point, I went to Miss Leon to question her about who this Badger person was.
Did you learn who Badger was?
Yes, I was informed that Badger was the alias given to Blake Hart.
Did Miss Leon tell you anything else?
Yeah, she did. I asked Miss Leon what had been stolen from her, and I was informed that she believed that Miss Hart had stolen an ounce of marijuana and exactly $500 in various bills wrapped in a rubber band.
And how did this interview impact your investigation?
Well, with all that, I had enough information to obtain a warrant and search Blake Hart's place of residence. And from my interviews with Miss Leon and Miss Butler, I had a list of evidence to search for. So all I needed to do was go in and see if those items were there.
Did these stories match the evidence?
Yes, they did. I found that Blake Hart was in possession of an ounce of marijuana and $500 in various bills wrapped in a rubber band, which is exactly what Miss Leon had described and stolen from her. I also found a bulky black coat with a hoodie with a distinctive hole in the abdomen area, just as Miss Butler has described.
Now, Officer Grant, did you find a weapon in Blake Hart's apartment?
Yes, I did. I found a loaded Glock 19 handgun hidden in Blake Hart's kitchen drawer.
Did you take a picture of these items?
Yeah, I did. I actually brought them here today if you would like to have a look.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I will be screen sharing exhibits 6 through 8. Co-counsel, if you wouldn't mind scrolling through them all. Now, Officer Grant, do you know what these items are?
Yes, these are pieces of evidence I collected from Blake Hart.
Your Honor, the prosecution moves exhibits 6, 7, and 8 into evidence pursuant to stipulation 1 that both parties have already agreed that these pictures are authentic and accurate.
Any other objections from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, they're so entered.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, could you walk us through these images?
Yes, I can. As you can see in Exhibit 6, I found exactly $500 in Blake Hart's bedroom drawer. And that right there is Exhibit 7 and is the hoodie I collected from Blake Hart's camper. And finally, that's Exhibit 8, and it shows the marijuana and Glock 19 handgun I found in Miss Hart's drawer.
At this time, I will stop screen sharing. Would you do any further investigation into this evidence?
Yes, I would later try to conduct a fingerprint analysis, but I was only able to get one usable, but not perfect fingerprint from the bag of marijuana.
Were you able to match the fingerprint with anyone?
Unfortunately, I wasn't. There was a potential match flagged from Mr. Hart's roommate, but the system just uses the splitter 5 closest matches to the fingerprint, and no matter the condition. A human then has to go through those fingerprints and make a final determination, which I did as a trained fingerprint determinator.
And were you able to conclude about the fingerprint?
I was able to determine that it was not a match to Hayden Russell. While it would have been best practice to get a second opinion, sadly, there was no one else available at the time. So I did connect my own conclusion, and I'm confident of it.
Did you collect any other evidence in today's case?
Of course, after seizing the marijuana money, I separated Blake Hart and her roommate in separate rooms in order to conduct interviews.
What did you learn in these interviews?
I didn't learn much. Blake Hart informed me that she had been invoking her Fifth Amendment rights while Hayden just started yelling. While I was trying to file the marijuana into evidence, Hayden shouted, "It's my marijuana, it's my marijuana."
And what did you do?
Well, of course, I entertained the possibility, but after questioning Miss Russell, it soon became clear that it wasn't the case. I suspected that Miss Russell was just trying to cover for Blake Hart since she saw me confiscate the marijuana. I also asked Hayden Russell where Blake had gotten the $500 from him, and she had no explanation.
Did you ask Hayden Russell anything else?
Yes, I was informed by Hayden that Miss Hart left on a walk around 11:30 and was not back till 12:30. And when I pressed Miss Russell on where Blake was, they didn't have an answer. I then booked Hayden Russell for harboring marijuana and at her home.
Now, after interviewing these witnesses, did you do anything else for today's case?
Yes, I had all the evidence I was looking for. So after I've left to look through Blake Hart's phone and match the text messages that Miss Leon received from Badger. However, I learned that Miss Hart's phone had conveniently been wiped, all of its data.
So finally, Officer Grant, what did you do after collecting all of this evidence?
I arrested Blake Hart for robbery in the first degree. Every single piece of circumstantial and physical evidence pointed me towards to conclude that Blake Hart was the individual that robbed Miss Leon on March 14th.
Thank you, Officer Grant. Your Honor, no further questions.
A cross-examination for this witness?
Yes. Officer Grant, You had a prior job as a forensic science technician before becoming an officer, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And you primarily dealt with fingerprint collection and chemical analysis of drugs and intoxicants, correct?
Yes, sir, it did.
And due to your training as a forensic science technician, you're able to run some of your own testing, correct?
Yes, sir, I am able to run fingerprint analysis and drug transaction, well, toxin analysis.
In fact, didn't you conduct testing on the marijuana bag found at Hart and Russell's apartment?
Yes, sir, I did. And after concluding that, well, after looking through it, I concluded that it was not a match to Hayden Russell or Blake Hart.
And after submitting the bag to the AFIS, it returned a potential match to Russell, correct?
Yes, sir, it did. But after further examination, we concluded that it was not Hayden Russell and they did not match.
And if the bag had shown a match for Russell's fingerprint, that would mean the robbery did not occur and support Russell's account, correct?
It wouldn't mean that it didn't occur. It would just mean that that ounce of marijuana did not belong to Miss Kennedy Leon.
However, after further reviewing the fingerprint, you found no match between the bag and Russell, correct?
Correct. I found no match between the two prints.
And you were the one to make that comparison.
Correct. I was, since there was no other officers there to be able to conduct fingerprint analysis.
When you admit it is best practice for someone else to, other than an investigating officer, make the comparison?
Yes, it is best practice, but while I was stated, there was no other officers there to be able to conduct the fingerprint analysis, so I had to do it.
But you still decided to make the comparison yourself.
Yes, because as I have previously stated, we had no other officers there to conduct the fingerprint analysis, so I kind of had to do it.
And you're also working for a detective position with the Scarborough Police Department, correct?
Yes, I'm hoping for it.
And you have been allowed to respond to some of the cases in the past in order to gain detective experience, correct?
That is true, but for today's case, I did have permission with my chief, so.
However, you had never investigated with as a police detective without a supervising detective before, correct?
Correct, not before this case, but as I stated, my chief did clear me for this case, so I was given permission.
And securing a conviction in this case would help with your promotion to detective, correct?
Yes, it definitely would help.
Officer Grant, you stated you were familiar with Sawyer Scott, correct?
Yes, sir, I am.
And you arrested them in 2018, correct?
Yes, sir, I arrested him for
Objection, Your Honor. This goes into improper character evidence. May I explain?
Yes.
As I expect the opposing counsel will go into, this line of questioning will go into a previous arrest Officer Grant has made of Sawyer Scott. And they're trying to show that since Officer Grant has been biased to Sawyer Scott in the past, that he will be biased in this case, and that goes towards propensity.
Okay, your argument is well heard. My question is, who is Sawyer Scott and why are they relevant to the case?
Your Honor, this is one of the eyewitnesses that opposing counsel will be bringing to the stand. Is their eyewitness is important because they're going to go on to say that Officer Grant ignored this evidence, but in fact, this is just going towards propensity.
Okay, now that I understand who Sawyer Scott is, any response from the defense on those grounds that this is improper character evidence?
Yes. Sawyer Scott is Sawyer Scott's a Sawyer Scott's opinion on the case is very important and is from their own personal view, and I believe it's very important for their judge of character of Officer Grant.
Your Honor, may I respond?
I'm sorry, I've gotten myself a little confused. So Officer Grant has arrested Scott in the past?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. But they didn't arrest them in relationship to this case?
No.
No. And that relationship, discussing that relationship, is objectionable because it will bias the jury towards Scott by discussing a previous arrest.
Your Honor, I believe that it will bias the jury against Officer Grant. This arrest has nothing to do to today's case, and it will only go to show that since Officer Grant has acted one way in the past, that he will do so again today.
But he didn't act that, he doesn't always arrest Scott.
Yes,
So-
Your Honor.
Okay, I'm just wondering what the propensity is for. Is it for arresting Scott? Is it for not trusting what Scott says? What is Mr. Grant more likely to do?
Your Honor, we believe that opposing counsel will be saying that Officer Grant has acted biased against Sawyer Scott in the past, so that he will be acting biased in this investigation, and they cannot use that for propensity.
May I respond?
Yes, please.
I believe that it is, we use Officer Grant's record in this case, and it is very important in this relationship between Sawyer Scott and Officer Grant for the conviction of Blake Hart.
Yes, I don't, I see where you're coming from, Ms. Taliaferro. Your objection and arguments are well taken. I don't believe this is demonstrated propensity or is going to bias the jury in any way. Mr. Grant is a police officer. He makes arrests when he feels they are appropriate, and he didn't arrest Miss Sawyer Scott in this case. I'm going to let them go down this line of questioning a little further. Yeah, so overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
And apparently Scott was suffering from a hypoglycemic episode, correct?
Apparently, yes, but I do stand by my conviction of a DUI.
And prosecutors dismissed the charges?
Can you repeat the question?
And prosecutors dismissed the charges?
They did, sadly, but I do stand by my initial arrest.
Sawyer Scott tried to contact you after Hart was indicted to discuss the robbery case, correct?
Yes, sir, he did, but as he didn't give any specifics to the robbery and how many robberies have happened in the Commonwealth over just the past year, it wasn't really exactly enough to pursue it right away. So I was going to get one of my other agents to do it, but sadly, I never got around to it.
But you did not contact Sawyer Scott back, correct? Just to
No,
clarify.
sir, I did not. But honestly, if I could go back in time, I definitely would.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
Does the prosecution have anything further for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Brief redirect.
All right, proceed whenever you're ready.
Now, Officer Grant, you were given permission to act as detective in today's case.
Yes, ma'am, I was done by my chief officer.
And also, did your past relationship with Sawyer Scott have anything to do with your investigation today?
No, ma'am, it actually kind of slipped my mind who that was until I researched their name and found out.
Your Honor, no further questions. We ask that this witness be allowed to step down.
Well, does the defense have any recross on those grounds?
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Grant, you are free to step down. And it's my understanding that the prosecution only has 3 witnesses to call today. So do we want a brief I don't know when all loss is, maybe a brief 5-minute break before proceeding with defense case in chief.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I have 10:13 on my clock right now, so we will begin again at 10:18.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I have 10:18. Is everyone back and ready to proceed?
Your Honor, we still have one using the restroom.
Okay, we'll just wait for them to return.
The prosecution is ready to proceed.
Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
All right, defense counsel, you may begin by calling your first witness.
Your Honor, I would like to call Blake Hart to the stand for direct questions.
Great, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Please state your name for the record.
Blake Hart.
And where do you live?
I was born and raised in Scarborough.
Mrs. Hart, how do you know Hayden Russell?
Well, Hayden was kind of the closest thing I had to an older sister. My parents were always working when I was growing up, and Hayden kind of lived next door. And my mom and his mom were actually stepsisters, so I guess that kind of makes us step cousins.
What kind of a relationship do you have with Hayden?
A really good one. Hayden was always looking out for me. After I graduated high school, I decided to move out of my parents' house. It was pretty tough being on my own, but fortunately, Hayden took me in and kind of forced me to grow up and told me I had to pay my share of the bill.
How do you know Kennedy Lyon?
I had a friend, Bonnie Jefferson, who was a client at Kennedy's. To my understanding, Kennedy would give his clients code names, and Ronnie's was Badger. When I did myself to contact Kennedy with the name Badger.
Why would Kennedy have accused you of giving out the codename Badger?
Ronnie was the original Badger, but he could have given the map to others before he passed away that really had something to do with me.
Do you recall what your day was like on March 14th, 2021?
Yes, I was playing video games with Hayden Russell, and then at about 11:30, I decided to need to go off. We're pretty stressed. I had recently applied for a new job, and I realized after checking my phone that I had received a single call back. I told Hayden that I needed to go for a walk around the apartment.
Your Honor, can you hear Kennedy Lyon good? It's a little bit like glitchy in my headphone. Oh, Blake Hart.
I cannot hear it at all. I am so sorry.
Hey, hey, Blake Hart, can you take out your headphone or something and try using it without? You're like very glitchy to us.
What?
You're very glitchy to the court. Can you take it out, your headphone? Sorry, I just heard that it was glitchy. Can't you try talking?
Yes, try saying something. And for our timekeepers, if we could give them a little leeway in time here because this is a technical difficulty. So Ms. Hart, if you would say something for the court.
I trying. Is it still glitchy?
Yes.
Is it not saying
A little.
anything?
I can hear a little bit of it. It's kind of glitchy.
I don't know what to do.
So the only thing I can think of is getting a better connections somewhere. Yeah, if you could say something again, just to make sure that it's still a problem.
I am trying to look at my Wi-Fi right.
Your Honor, if Blake Hart would like to, I think you guys are all recording from the same place. If you want to
Yeah.
switch
We could,
computers with somebody, then
Brayden, can you
I can
pass
make an
your
adjustment.
laptop to her? Yeah, we could have
Yeah, that's
Brayden
great.
Jordan, one of our attorneys, switch with her.
Okay, that's
We'll have one of our attorneys switch with her.
yeah, I think that's a good compromise.
Yeah, she'll just mute and turn off her camera, and then they'll give her. Sorry about this. You weren't expecting this.
Oh my gosh, I did Zoom mock trial. I understand. I had to do I've had to do the exact same thing. Like the exact same thing.
They're switching it right now. Just 1 second. See? She's now on our defense attorney, Brayden Jordan's computer.
All right, so let's get a test. Ms. Hart, if you would say something for the court.
Can you guys hear me now?
Perfect. That's great.
Where would you want me to start at? Would you want me to like restart or like give a few questions back if you couldn't have internet or something?
Wherever you feel it's necessary. It was pretty gargled early on. And I just heard we don't have an all loss, so we have plenty of time if you wanted to restart. But it's up to
Okay,
you.
we
It's
can
up
try
to
to
you.
restart. We can restart.
Okay.
State your name for the record.
Blake Hart.
Where do you live?
I was born and raised in Scarborough.
Mrs. Hart, how do you know Hayden Russell?
Well, Hayden Russell is the closest thing I've had to an older sister. She grew up next door to me, and my parents were always working when I was growing up. Our mothers are actually stepsisters, so I guess that kind of makes us step cousins.
What kind of relationship did you have with Hayden Russell?
A really good one. Hayden was always looking out for me. After I graduated high school, I decided to move out of my parents' house. It was tough being on my own, but Hayden kind of made me grow up and told me I had to pay my share of the bills.
How do you know Kennedy Lyon?
While I was living with Hayden, I regrettably started using marijuana. For some time, I was getting it exclusively from Kennedy Lyon.
What kind of relationship do you have with Kennedy Lyon?
Well, it started out pretty rocky. I had a friend, Ronnie Jefferson, who was one of Kennedy's clients. To my understanding, Kennedy gave his clients code names, and Ronnie's was Badger. One night, I took it upon myself to contact Kennedy using the codename Badger, and Kennedy was pretty upset that I had used Ronnie's codename, and he forbid me from ever giving it out to anyone other.
Why would Kennedy Lyon have accused you of giving out the codename Badger?
Well, Ronnie Jefferson was the original Badger, but he could have given it out to anyone before he passed away, and that really has nothing to do with me.
And did you give the codename Badger out to anybody else?
Actually, I did. One night at a party in March, I was pretty mad at Kennedy because he had been such a shady dealer, and I decided that it would be a good time to give out his contact information. I told the college kids at the party to use the codename Badger.
Can you recall your day of March 14th, 2021?
Yes, I was playing video games with Hayden Russell, and then at about 11:30, I think, I decided I needed to take a walk. And I was pretty stressed because I had recently applied for a new job, and after checking my phone, I realized I hadn't received a single call back. I told Hayden that I needed to go for a walk around the apartment.
What were you wearing on the day, March 14th, 2021, at the time that you went for your walk?
I was wearing a black coat.
How long were you gone for when you went walking around your apartment complex on March 14th, 2021?
About 30, 40 minutes.
What did you do after you finished your walk?
I came back to the apartment, got a drink of water, changed out of my sweaty clothes, and then started playing video games with Hayden Russell again. A few hours later, to our surprise, we heard the police at the door, and
What did the police do?
the police handcuffed me and Hayden, and Officer Grant read me my rights. I decided not to talk, but I overheard Hayden talking to Officer Grant.
What did you hear Hayden Russell saying to Officer Grant?
She said that it was her marijuana.
Do you know what Hayden was talking about when he said that?
Objection, Your Honor. This is a hearsay statement.
It's to Hayden
Your
Russell's
Honor.
statements, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Any response from Ms. Pritchard?
Your Honor, I believe that this is liable because they were both there during this account. And
Your Honor, may I
heard
respond?
him say so.
Yes.
That is specifically why it is a hearsay statement, because she heard it. It is an out-of-court statement being used for the truth of the matter asserted. Therefore, they cannot use this.
I agree. Ms. Pritchard, do you have any other reason or exception for Ms. Russell's statements that Ms. Hart is testifying to?
I believe that this doesn't fall under hearsay because this was said in her affidavit that she said this, and she said it in there.
Just because it's in the affidavit doesn't make it automatically admissible. So I'm going to sustain this objection. Thank you, Mrs. Taliaferro.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mrs. Hart, what were you arrested for?
I was told I was arrested for robbery in the first degree. I was so confused. I had no idea what Officer Grant was talking about. And it wasn't until later on when I talked to my attorney that I realized I was being accused of robbing Kennedy Lion in Rue Park on March 14th, which is completely ridiculous because I was nowhere near the park that day.
What did Officer Grant find in your apartment?
Officer Grant found quite a bit of cash found in my nightstand. It was an emergency fund. Hayden always told me that I needed to build an emergency fund. I never told Hayden of the money because I knew she would be disappointed in me once she realized how I had obtained the money through shoplifting. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life.
What else did Officer Grant find in your apartment?
Officer Grant found a gun in our kitchen drawer of our apartment. The gun was owned by me and Hayden, and I never touched it that day. Officer Grant also found a bag of marijuana in the kitchen drawer. I had no idea Hayden had bought the marijuana or that it was in that drawer. The last thing Officer Grant found in the apartment was a hoodie that was found in my hamper. I never wore the hoodie that day, plus it had a hole in it.
Did you ask for a plea deal during this case?
Yes, but I decided not to take the plea deal because I can't plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Defense cross-examination for prosecution a cross-examination for this witness.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Proceed whenever you're ready.
Now, Ms. Hart, I'd like to start out by talking about your relationship to Kennedy Leon. Now, Kennedy Leon was your drug dealer, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you had bought marijuana from her for a while.
Yes, that's correct.
But towards the end of February, you began to suspect that Miss Leon was giving you less than what you paid for.
Yes, that's correct.
And this upset you, didn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
So you decided to confront her.
Yes.
Right, now let's talk about that confrontation. In that confrontation, you accused Miss Leon of ripping you off.
Yes, I did.
You yelled at her.
It might got a little bit heated. Yeah.
And then when Miss Hart, you threatened her.
I don't know if I threatened her. I said that bad things happen to shady dealers, but I don't think that was a threat. That's just a fact. That does happen.
But yes, this is a threat.
Objection, Your Honor. Rule 38, argumentative.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, response.
As this is a cross, it is in nature, to some degree argumentative. I'm simply asking the witness to give me a yes or no response to my question.
I'm going to agree. I don't believe Ms. Hart has given a clear answer on whether this was a threat or not. Either you did or you didn't. And you can say that it wasn't a threat, but or you didn't consider it a threat either. But yeah, I agree that a clear answer has not been given.
And objection, asked and answered.
I'm also going to overrule that one because she's asking for clarification. A straight answer or a clear answer has not been given. I'm still confused. So it has to be egregious before I will sustain an asked and answered. So I'm going to overrule it at this time.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Hart, yes or no, this was a threat.
I did not consider it a threat.
But Ms. Hart, you accused Miss Leone of ripping you off, and then you told her bad things happen to shady dealers, correct?
Yes.
Now let's discuss how you would typically contact Miss Leone. To meet up with Miss Leone, you would text her, right?
Yes, I would.
You would text her using a private number.
Yes, I would.
And when you would text her, you would identify yourself as Badger.
Yes, I would.
And Miss Leone ordered you to never give out that name to any other people, correct?
Yeah, she did.
Now, you used this codename to buy marijuana from Miss Leone for months, right?
Yes, I did.
And you claim that after that confrontation with Miss Leone, you never contacted her again.
Yeah.
But Miss Hart, we can't verify that through your text messages, can we?
No, my phone had frozen and the only way to fix it was to do a factory reset, which unfortunately did wipe everything. I didn't know that this was going to happen or I wouldn't have done that. I didn't know I couldn't see in the future.
Well, that's right, Miss Hart. On the day of the robbery, you wiped your phone of all data, didn't you?
Yes, I did. It was frozen. I didn't know that's the only way to reset.
Objection, objection, speculation.
Could you elaborate more on the grounds?
I see that like they are speculating that like trying to prove their point across in these questions.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm not asking the witness to enter the mindset of anyone else. I'm simply asking her a fact. Did she or did she not wipe all of her information on the day of the robbery?
One final response from the defense before I make my ruling.
No further question, no further things, Your Honor.
All right, it's overruled.
I'll ask you again, Ms. Hart. On the day of the robbery, you wiped your phone of all data. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
So you just happened to wipe your phone of all data just before the police arrived?
Yeah, my phone froze. I knew from past experiences, but that the only way to get it unfroze was to do a factory reset. And I
Of
learned,
course, Miss Leone, or excuse me. Were you finished with your response?
no. And I learned later on that all of the data was wiped from their servers at the actual company. I learned that a while back, and that was the only way. Like, I didn't know I didn't know that it would come to this.
Of course, Miss Hart. Now I'd like to talk about a few items found in your home. Now, you were in court to hear Officer Grant testify, correct?
Yes, I was.
And you heard that he found a gray hoodie with a hole in the abdomen area in your apartment.
Yes, he did, but I never wore that hoodie. It was for more housework.
Exactly. You maintain that you never wear this hoodie.
No.
But you didn't provide the police with any other clothes that you claim to wear on your walk.
No.
Now, you also heard that Officer Grant found $500 in your bedside drawer.
Yes, but it was emergency money. That was what it was there for.
Exactly. You say that you didn't steal this money from Miss Leon, correct?
Correct, I didn't.
You claim that you sold this money by selling items.
Yes.
But you don't remember what items you sold.
No.
And you claim that from 11:30 to 12:30, you were walking around your apartment complex, correct?
Yeah, about that time.
You're not aware of anyone who saw you were there that could corroborate that.
No.
And Miss Hart, you also heard Officer Grant found a gun in your apartment.
Yes, but the gun was owned by me and Hayden, and I never touched it that day.
And you would agree that you had access to that gun.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
Finally, Miss Hart, you were in court. You were in court today to hear Miss Leon testify, right?
Yes, I was.
You heard her say that she was threatened.
Yeah, I guess I was.
Now, you heard her say that she had a gun pointed at her.
Yes, I did.
You heard her say that she was robbed.
Yes, I heard her say that.
And even after all of that, you would still say that you are not sorry that Miss Leon got robbed.
No, I'm not. She was a shady dealer, and like I said, bad things do happen, but I didn't. That doesn't mean that I did this. Other people could have had her information. They're like,
Your Honor, no further questions.
Defense, is there anything further for your witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hart. You're free to step down. Does the defense have any further witnesses to call?
Brayden is getting his computer from Sophia right now.
Your Honor, we would like to call Hayden Russell to the stand.
You may proceed whenever you're ready.
Please state your name for the record.
Hayden Russell.
How old are you?
I'm 25 years old.
Where are you from?
I was born and raised in Scarborough, Kentucky.
How do you know Blake Hart?
Like she said in her state testimony, she's always been like a younger sibling to me. We're roommates now, and I've always tried to look out for her. I mean, our moms were stepsisters, so we're kind of like step cousins. We've just been really close ever since we were little.
What do you do for a living?
When I was younger, my dad was kind of like a neighborhood mechanic. So I helped him around a little bit, and I kind of fell in love with what he did. So I didn't end up going to college when I could find a job that I really enjoyed. So I got a job as an oil change tech at Lightning Lube.
How did Blake start living with you?
He graduated high school in 2018. He wanted to leave home, and we've always been close. So I took it upon myself to look out for him, and I was not going to let him live on the street. So I offered to get an apartment together, and we did.
Was she required to pay rent?
Yes, for sure, because a 2-bedroom apartment would be a little pricier than just one. So he had to help pay the bills, pay half the food and half of the utilities. He got a job at a restaurant, at a catering business, but then COVID happened, so he kind of couldn't work there anymore, and it took away him paying on his portion of the bills for a little bit.
How do you know Kenny Lane?
I met a few of her friends, but I didn't really talk to the ones that were in the wrong crowd that I didn't want to be involved in. I don't know him personally, but we're about the same age and we didn't go to the same school.
Do you know if Blake and Kenny knew each other?
Yeah, they were friends. They had a falling out around February or March of 2021.
Do you recall what you did on March 14, 2021?
We were playing Super Crush Siblings on my X station. Around 11:30, she got her phone out. She started to text someone. I was playing the game, so I don't have like details on what she was texting, but.
How did Blake act while you all were playing the game?
I was winning, so she got a little bit upset, and I made a comment saying, "Quit being such a sore loser," or like something along that lines, and it made her even more upset. So she decided to go on a walk, but that was normal for her to do. She would walk around the apartment sometimes.
Could you elaborate a little more on the grounds?
Miss Russell is speculating into Blake Hart's mindset, saying that she was angry or frustrated.
All right, response, Mr. Jordan.
Yes, Blake Hart has testified in an affidavit that they, well, let me rephrase that. Blake Hart claimed, Hayden Russell knows for personal knowledge that Blake Hart became very upset during the game.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Blake Hart may appear frustrated or mad, but Miss Russell cannot speculate into the mindset of Blake Hart and deem it whether she is mad or frustrated or not.
I tend to agree. Miss Russell can testify as to what she saw or what she heard Miss Hart doing that led her to those conclusions. And if you would just lay a little bit of foundation as to what this witness saw or heard in relation to Miss Hart being angry or frustrated. So barring that, I'm going to sustain the objection until the time that that foundation is laid.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What did Blake do before he went for his walk?
I seen him go to he went to the bedroom and changed.
What was Blake wearing when she came out of her room?
When she left, I was in the restroom, so I did not see what she was wearing when she left the apartment.
How long was she gone for?
I'm gonna say about an hour because I remember when I came out from the bathroom, the X station clock said 11:30, and when she got back, it said 12:30.
What was Blake wearing when she came back from her walk?
The next time I seen her, she was coming out of her bedroom. She was wearing a t-shirt and shorts.
Do you own a gun?
Yes, me and Blake do own a gun, but we keep it in the kitchen drawer of our apartment. Our parents wanted us to have one because we don't live in the safest neighborhood, and it was just us two in the apartment. So they told us they would feel safer if we got it, so we did.
How often did Blake or you have to use the gun?
Very rarely. I mean, we didn't really need it in case, like, just for an emergency is the only reason we would really have it. We also keep it in the kitchen drawer, and the kitchen drawer is very squeaky, so I would hear it if it was opened, and I didn't that day.
Were you arrested on March 14, 2021?
A few hours after Blake got back from his walk, there were several police officers that came to the apartment. They had a search warrant, and Officer Grant, I know he searched the apartment and found the marijuana in the drawer next to the gun. He questioned me about it, and I confessed that it was mine. So I was arrested for possession.
To your knowledge, why is Blake Hart arrested?
Officer Grant started asking me questions about when Blake went on his walk. I mean, I didn't know many details, but I realized that I should not keep talking when I heard that he was being arrested for robbery in the first degree. It shocked me. I mean, I didn't think there was any way Blake could do that. It caught me completely off guard.
What else did Officer Grant ask you?
He started asking me questions about the gun, or if me or Blake had touched it that day. I told him what I knew, and I didn't touch it personally. And like I said, the drawer was very squeaky, and I never heard her say anything, or I never heard her go in the kitchen and get it. I did not hear it. So,
Were you offered a plea deal on the marijuana possession charge if you were to testify against Blake Hart?
yeah, it was offered, but obviously I said absolutely not, because I would never do that if I don't believe that she would rob him or her.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination for this witness.
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed?
Proceed whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Ms. Russell. I'm going to have to ask you a few questions today. And first, I'd like to talk to you about your relationship with Blake Hart.
Okay.
Now, you would agree with me that you and Mrs. Hart are close, correct?
Yes, we are very close. We grew up together, and she's like a younger sibling to me.
That's right. You describe yourself as Mrs. Hart's older sister, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you took care of her while she was at school, correct?
Yeah, I tried to be there for her as much as I can, because she was like a younger sibling to me, and we did get very close.
And you even live with Mrs. Hart?
Yeah, we got an apartment together. We had our own rooms. We had our own privacy, but we did stay in a place together, yes.
And now you're testifying on Mrs. Hart's behalf today, correct?
Can you repeat your question? I didn't hear you.
And now you're testifying on Mrs. Hart's behalf today?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Mrs. Russell. Now, I'd like to talk to you about Blake Hart's relationship with marijuana. You're aware that Mrs. Hart smoked marijuana, correct?
Yeah, I didn't like it. She knew it bothered me, but she was trying to do better.
And you're aware that Mrs. Hart bought this marijuana from a woman named Kennedy Leon, correct?
I knew that Kennedy was in a bad crowd, and I knew that they were friends, so yes.
And you're aware that Mrs. Hart had a falling out with Miss Leon at the end of February, correct?
Yes, they had a falling out, though, because she wanted to do better. She wanted to make her life better, make better choices, and Kennedy did not like that.
Now, Mrs. Russell. Now, Mrs. Hart had bought marijuana from Miss Leon for years now, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And now you're claiming right before March 14th, she suddenly stopped?
She knew it bothered me, and she also knew that if she kept it going, then she wouldn't get in a good place in life. So yes, she wanted to stop. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's good that she wanted to stop. It was her choice, and she made it, and I'm here for her that.
Mrs. Russell, after all this time using marijuana, she suddenly stopped right before March 14th, correct?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about your relationship with marijuana. Throughout high school, you stayed away from drugs, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You wouldn't touch them, right?
No, I never wanted to get to the point where I was doing it a lot or anything.
And you encouraged Blake not to use drugs, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And now you're claiming that right before March 14th, you suddenly decided to start using drugs, correct?
Yeah, I wasn't using like very often. I just actually went to a party right before that, and there was a person there, and I asked for some. I wanted to try it, but I was never really around that. No.
But after all this time of claiming not to use marijuana, you suddenly decided to start using it, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you can't even give the name of the drug dealer you claimed to have bought those drugs from, can you?
No, it was dark. I didn't see, and we really just, I bought it, I got it, and then kind of went on with their day.
All right, Mrs. Russell, I'd like to talk to you about March 14th. Around 11:30 that day, you saw Mrs. Hart get on her phone, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And it appeared as if she was texting someone, correct?
Yes, but I didn't see who or didn't know anything about it really.
That's right, you don't know who she was texting. And then you went to the bathroom, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And by the time you were finished, Mrs. Hart was gone. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I did not see what she was wearing or leave. I was in the bathroom, yeah.
That's right. You don't know what she did before she left, correct?
I know that I was told she went on a walk because she was frustrated that I was winning the game.
But before she left, you don't know what she did, correct?
No, yes, that is correct.
And now Miss Hart was gone for an hour, wasn't she?
Yes.
And Mrs. Russell, during that hour, you cannot tell me for certain where she went, correct?
Yes, I cannot tell you.
Now, on direct examination, you mentioned that you and Mrs. Hart owned a gun. Let's talk about that. You and Mrs. Hart stored that gun in your kitchen drawer, correct?
Yes, we did keep it in our top kitchen drawer.
And whenever that drawer opened, it made a loud noise, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. You could definitely hear it if somebody was getting into it.
Now, when Mrs. Hart returned from their hour excursion, they went to the kitchen, correct?
Yes, but as she told Officer Grant, she went to get a drink of water.
But you weren't in that kitchen, were you?
No.
And when they went to the kitchen, you heard a loud noise, didn't you?
Yes, but like she said, she was getting a drink of water and the faucet makes loud noises. It very well could have been the faucet.
That's right. You do believe Miss Hart was getting a glass of water, correct?
Yes.
But when Miss Hart came back, she didn't have a glass of water, did she?
No.
And you didn't see what they were doing in the kitchen, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You just heard a noise, correct?
Yes.
And now, Miss Russell, you didn't see whether or not Mrs. Hart had taken the gun that day. Isn't that right?
No, I did not.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Does the defense have anything further for this witness?
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Russell. You are free to step down. Does the defense have any further witnesses to call in this case?
Yes, Your Honor. I now call Sawyer Scott up to the stand.
All right, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Sawyer Scott.
What is your educational background?
I graduated from Bellarmine with a Bachelor's of Arts in Business.
Where do you work?
I work at a local law firm. It's called Allison and Kremer.
And where do you live?
I live here in Castleton County in it's like an apartment kind of across from the park, so.
And what were you doing the morning of March 14th?
I was actually watching something on the sports channel, like a pregame analysis.
And why was it so important that you get something to eat so quickly?
Oh, well, I have what is called diabetic hypoglycemia, and that means I have to get food because my blood sugar is like abnormally low. So yeah.
And you stated that you went to drive. Why didn't you not drive to get your food?
I can't drive right now. That's what my doctor said. So I'm not allowed to drive because of my hypoglycemia.
And what did you observe as you were walking through the park?
I saw Kennedy and this person, and they were in like, well, yeah. I couldn't tell the gender or anything.
How did you know the person you saw waiting in the park was Kennedy Lyon?
Because I went to high school with Kennedy. I recognize her.
Could you please describe the other person in the park with Kennedy Lyon?
So I was about to say, but they were wearing like this bulky coat, but I couldn't really tell the gender because they were all covered up. So
Could you please describe what the other person was holding in their hand?
so I grew up in a gun family. I know my guns. I can tell the difference between a Kemper 1911 and a Glock 21 from like 30 feet away. So, and yeah, it didn't look like a gun to me at all, honestly.
And why didn't you call the police?
I just wanted to get out of there and get food. It didn't really cross my mind a lot, you know.
Let the record reflect that I am now screen sharing to opposing counsel what has been marked as evidence. Sawyer Scott, do you recognize this document?
Yeah.
Is this a true and accurate depiction of what you saw as you walked through the park on March 14th?
Yes.
What happened after you bought your food?
So I went to a store to get some food, like a general store or something, and I ran into my friends there, and they actually picked me up and we hung out for a bit, and then took me home. So.
And when did you learn about the alleged robbery of Kennedy Lyon?
This detective, excuse me, called Jamie McCreary came to my apartment and questioned me about it. So.
And what did you do after you spoke with investigator McCreary?
I actually tried to get in contact with Officer Dakota Grant.
And have you spoken at all with Officer Dakota Grant about what you observed that day?
No, he never got back to me.
And what did you say in the voicemail that you left for Officer Grant?
I told him that I would like to talk about a robbery that he investigated.
And let the record reflect that I am now screen sharing what has been marked as evidence 10. Sawyer Scott, do you recognize this voicemail transcription?
Yeah.
Okay, I know. Oh, sorry. Does this appear to be a true and accurate depiction of the voicemail message that you left for Officer Grant?
Yeah.
Why do you believe that Officer Grant would not have returned your call?
Well, I don't really know why, but I suspect it could be because he has something against me. I don't know.
And why did you agree to testify today?
Well, he does have a history of kind of just ignoring evidence or putting his reputation ahead of, actually doing his job. So I didn't want someone who is innocent to, get the guilty verdict because of his failings. So that's why I'm here today.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any cross-examination for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Proceed whenever you're ready, Ms. Kim.
Good morning, Mr. Scott. I'm going to ask you a few questions and I'll have you on your way. Now, Mr. Scott, as you stated in your direct, you suffer from type 2 diabetes, correct?
Yeah.
And when your blood sugar gets low, you can enter what is known as hypoglycemia.
Yep.
And you were suffering from hypoglycemia on March 14th, correct?
Yes, I was.
And I'd like to clarify what your common symptoms of hypoglycemia are for the members of the jury. And you typically...
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were going to let me say it. My bad. Go ahead.
You typically become shaky, correct?
Yeah.
And you become anxious.
Yep.
You get bad headaches.
Mm-hmm.
And these headaches can cause problems with your vision, correct?
Yeah, but not all the time.
Still, they give you real issues.
Kind of very, yeah, it's a hard time, but it's kind of in and out, I'd say.
Still, they give you real issues seeing long distances, correct?
Objection. Relevancy.
Response, Ms. Kim, as to why this difficulty in him seeing long distances is relevant.
Yes, Your Honor, this is relevant because Mr. Scott has told us today about what he saw on March 14th. However, if his vision got in the way, then that would make it very difficult for Mr. Scott to accurately see what he was seeing on that day.
All right, I'm going to overrule this objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, let me repeat the question for you, Mr. Scott. They give you real issues seeing long distances, correct?
Yeah, I would say so.
And you would agree with me that you were suffering from one of these headaches on March 14th, correct?
Yeah, but like it's not really something that I can pinpoint because, you know, it was in the moment, like I had all sorts of stuff going on with me.
Mr. Scott, so you would agree that you were suffering from one of these headaches on March 14th, yes?
I just said so, yes.
All right. Despite your headache, I'd like to talk to you about what you saw on March 14th. That day, you saw two people near the park bathrooms, correct?
Yes.
At that point, you were about 50 feet away from them.
Yeah.
One of them was Miss Leone.
Yeah, definitely.
And one of them was a person in a hoodie.
Yeah.
And Mr. Scott, you didn't recognize that person, correct?
Yeah, they were covered up and everything. I couldn't tell who they were.
And you couldn't see what color hoodie they were wearing.
Not really.
And you couldn't see how tall they were.
I wasn't really focused on the height, but no, I guess not.
Objection, Your Honor. Leading question.
This is cross-examination where leading questions are allowed, so I'm going to overrule this objection.
All right, Mr. Scott. I will repeat that question. You couldn't see how tall they were, correct?
No, I could not.
You couldn't see that person's face.
Well, because it was covered up. No, I couldn't.
And therefore, you couldn't see that person's skin color, correct?
No, I could not.
So, Mr. Scott, you can't tell us that the person you saw was not Blake Hart.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation for assuming that Scott missaw the incident in person.
I'm sorry, could you restate that? You cut out a lot.
Sorry. Objection for speculation, because is it assuming that my witness missaw the person?
Missaw. Okay. Miss Kim, a response?
Yes, Your Honor. I am just stating what has come to the conclusion that Mr. Scott might have not seen the person and could not conclude that it was Blake Hart due to the fact that he could not see how tall they were or this person's face or their skin color.
Okay.
Correct. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Miss Alfaro.
Correct, but they are simply just stating that they did not see them.
So I'm going to overrule this objection. I think foundation has been laid to cast doubt on this identification, but the witness is still free to, stick to his guns and say, I still thought it was who I thought it was. Or
I mean,
if,
I didn't think it was anyone.
Please don't speak right now. He can still state his own conclusions about who he believed or didn't believe was under the hood. So overruled at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Scott, I'll repeat that question. So, Mr. Scott, you couldn't tell us that the person you saw was not Blake Hart, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Now, on direct examination, you mentioned that you didn't see a gun that day, and I'd like to talk to you about why that might be. That day, you saw Miss Leone hand the other person a plastic bag, correct?
Yes.
But you didn't see that person pay Miss Leone for whatever was in that bag.
Well, I mean, as you stated earlier, I was not seeing things clearly. So.
In fact, Mr. Scott, you quickly left LaRue Park as soon as that bag was handed over, correct?
Yes.
So, if the person in the hoodie threatened Miss Leone after that, you wouldn't know.
No.
If the person in the hoodie pulled out a gun on Miss Leone after you left, you wouldn't know.
I suppose I wouldn't.
And if the person in the hoodie robbed Miss Leone after you left, you would not know.
Correct.
That's right. Anything that happened after that bag was handed over, you wouldn't have seen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Does the defense have anything further for their witness?
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scott. You're free to step down. And I believe that's the defense's final witness. So do we want to take another 5-minute break before closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes,
Right,
Your Honor.
as long as, great to have confirmation from the defense. I have 11:13 on my clock right now, so 5 minutes. We'll come back at 11:18.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, everyone, I have 11:18 on my clock. Are both sides here and ready to proceed with closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, prosecution, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. Now it's nearing the end of February and Blake Hart is frustrated. After buying marijuana from Kennedy Leon for months, she realizes that she isn't getting what she's paying for. The next time the two meet up, Blake Hart is shorted again and she confronts Miss Leon. She yells at Miss Leon, telling her that she's being ripped off and that she claims that she is owed more than what she's gotten. And as she turns to leave, she leaves a message. Bad things happen to shady dealers. And it was at that moment that Blake Hart hatched a plan. The next time she meets up with Kennedy Leon, she won't be bringing money, she'll bring a gun. She points this gun at Miss Leon's head, demands everything in her pockets, and takes what she believes is owed. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. As my co-counsel Hannah Kim explained at the beginning of today's trial, we held the burden of proof in today's case. We had the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Blake Hart is guilty of armed robbery. This meant that we had to prove that 1, Blake Hart stole property from Miss Leon, and that 2, when stealing this property, Blake Hart threatened Miss Leon with a handgun. And members of the jury, we have met this burden. Now let's go through how we did it. Today, you learned that around 11:30 on the morning of March 14th, Miss Leon received a message from Badger, the name she had assigned to Blake Hart. You've heard the name Badger a lot today. Opposing counsel tried to convince you that somebody other than Blake Hart could have used that name, but as you learned from Miss Leon, that is simply not the case. While Miss Leon had other people contact her as Badger, they were clearly not Blake Hart. And Blake Hart claimed that they gave out the name to other people, but when we asked her about those people, she couldn't tell you who they were. Members of the jury, they simply don't exist. The only Badger Miss Leon had ever agreed to meet up with is Blake Hart, and that's precisely what happened on March 14th. Now, Blake Hart contacted Miss Leon and arranged to purchase an ounce of marijuana at noon, and when they tried to meet up, there were 2 eyewitnesses that witnessed that transaction. The defense called Sawyer Scott, who told you that they didn't see a robbery take place. Members of the jury, we agree. Sawyer Scott didn't see a robbery because she left before that robbery took place. But there was one eyewitness that did stay, Miss Rory Butler. Miss Butler told you that while she couldn't see exactly what happened, she saw what Blake Hart was wearing, a bulky black coat and a zip-up hoodie with a distinctive hole in the side. As you learned from Officer Dakota Grant, both that black coat and hoodie with the hole in it were found in Blake Hart's apartment. Officer Grant had also showed you that he found exactly $500 and an ounce of marijuana Miss Leon had said was stolen from her. Now, Hayden Russell, Blake Hart's roommate and older sibling role, tried to convince you that that marijuana was hers. But as you learned, that doesn't add up. Hayden Russell had never used drugs in her life, while Blake Hart had used marijuana for years. Are we really supposed to believe that suddenly changed just days before the robbery? No, that doesn't make any sense. Now, finally, Officer Grant told you that he found a handgun in Blake Hart's apartment, just like the one Miss Leon described to the police. The only piece of evidence missing here is Blake Hart's text messages, which she conveniently wiped from her phone minutes before the police arrived. Now, members of the jury, the evidence in today's case points to one conclusion. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. We can't let people use violence and threats to get what they want. Find Blake Hart guilty of armed robbery. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing argument for the defense.
Yes. Members of the jury, on March 14, 2021, Kenny Lyon was robbed at LaRue Park, Castleton County, Kentucky. And Blake Hart has been wrongfully accused of this robbery, and the prosecution and multiple witnesses have been unable to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the individual who robbed Kenny Lyon was Blake Hart. And Blake Hart should be given a second chance by the justice system, as it has failed here today. Blake Hart was simply at home playing video games in their apartment with Hayden Russell, the roommate. And Blake had not come into contact with Kenny Lyon for an extended period of time, nor had they used marijuana an extended period of time. And multiple witnesses have been able to testify that Blake Hart was not the individual to rob Kenny Lyon. Yes, Blake Hart and Kenny Lyon have made mistakes before the events of March 14, 2021, but there is no reason that Blake should be punished for something they did not do. And Blake did purchase under the codename Badger, but so did Ronnie Jefferson and a number of other individuals. And Hayden Russell testifies that there is no way Blake could have taken the gun without them being aware of it, nor could Blake have been near or at the park on March 14, 2021. Another key piece of information is that Officer Grant does not have the best record, according to Tori Scott, in which Officer Grant does not look good at all, and also is eager to cut and use shortcuts for a promotion to detective. And with the evidence provided, we can, within multiple eyewitnesses, there should be no doubt in your mind that Blake Hart did not rob Kenny Lyon on March 14th in 2021. And we must remind the justice system to give Blake Hart a second chance, as it has made a poor decision in indicting Blake Hart. Blake Hart has been wrongfully accused of a crime they did not commit, but I hope you, the jury, can find the defendant Blake Hart not guilty. No further.
Any rebuttal from the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed whenever you're ready.
Members of the jury, like I said before, Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. Now, opposing counsel tried to come before you and tell you this spectacular story of an improper investigation. However, we explained to you that we found all items involved in this robbery in Blake Hart's apartment, that she also has a motive, that she has a poor history with Kennedy Leon. Members of the jury, it is very clear. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. Find Blake Hart guilty of armed robbery. Thank you.
Oh, and thank you, Mr. Jordan. Whew, so I'm gonna let my scoring judges finish their ballots. Sydney, Najoni, if you would just like send me a thumbs up or something when you're done with those, and then we can move on to comments. All right. I just heard from my two scoring judges that they are done. So we can get started with comments. I remember when I was in high school, we liked to do comments separately. So is that what you all want to do now, or we could do them together?
If the other team would like to do them separately, that's all right. We're also happy doing them together.
Any opinion from the defense?
We have no opinion. We are good with whatever you want to do, separate or together.
Okay, well, I think together we'll definitely save time. But you all have heard so much from me already. Nijoni or Sydney, do you all want to kick us off with an introduction of yourself and your comments? And
hi everyone, I'm Sydney. I'm a member of UK's mock trial team currently. I also did 4 years of mock trial in high school at Dixie Heights. Overall, I thought it was a really fun tournament to watch. I'm gonna let Nijoni introduce herself though before we get into comments.
Okay, hi, I'm Nijoni. I'm also on UK's mock trial team, and I've been on the team for the past 3 years. So, do you want to start first, or do you want me to go first, Sydney?
You can go first.
Okay. I kind of just have a overall things I want to say, because I try to be really specific and like your comments on your ballots. And then I'm going to go ahead and leave my email in the chat. So if you ask me questions about anything that I wrote, I can do that as well, or more specifics on what I had kind of jotted down in the comments. But kind of overall, I think as far as like objections, I feel like in the first half, I really have many, but then kind of started to see more in the second half. I would kind of just say for everybody to really look over like exceptions to objections, especially regarding like hearsay, because there's a lot of those that can be used. And I think sometimes the attorneys appear maybe confused on like what to respond to that. So I would just say to like look that over. Another thing that I think is really important, especially when we're on Zoom, is kind of just watching the way you like present yourself. I was kind of just noticing throughout that there was a lot of like distracting things, like certain hand movements that people were making that didn't really seem like they had anything to do with like what they were saying. So I would just say, unless you're making like hand movements for emphasis or for a certain purpose, to kind of really watch what you're doing. And then I think as well as just like your presence on Zoom and making sure that you're not like appearing like you're looking around or maybe like referring to something off screen. I kind of saw that a lot. And then also regarding the evidence, so I feel like there were a couple times when evidence was pulled up, but it kind of felt like it was just quickly shown and then taken off the screen. And so I feel like for the purposes of us like being able to understand what you're presenting, maybe leave the evidence on the screen if you're like currently talking about it, because they were kind of just like quick flashes of that. And then my last comment, kind of just for attorneys and witnesses on direct, just kind of make sure that you're taking pauses in between like statements. So when you're asking a question to your witness, kind of just make sure you're not going right into the next question before allowing them to respond, so it kind of appears more natural. Something that we kind of do in UK's mock trial team that's been really helpful is when we're practicing our directs, we'll have something that we can maybe toss back and forth, even just like a crumpled up piece of paper. So then there's kind of like that time in between when you ask a question and the witness responds, or vice versa, in the ending of like when the witness responds before you ask your next question. So it appears more conversational than rehearsed. But other than that, I think you guys did a really great job. And like I said, I have more specific comments, but those were kind of just my overall things.
Yeah, I'd like to echo a lot of what Nijoni had said, especially about looking off screen. It kind of felt very obvious at points that people were reading, and I understand it's on Zoom, so like sometimes we kind of fall behind and not like maintaining that same standard as in-person trials, but just make sure that you're like memorized and stuff, especially before regionals, because judges are going to count off for that and be kind of strict about that, I imagine. Rules of evidence as well, especially attorneys, really give those a look over and look over your directs and crosses, and you can kind of gauge what you're going to get objected to most of the time. So have kind of responses either just planned or written out that you can kind of respond to, that that way you're not like caught off guard. Because I know sometimes when you just randomly get objected to, like it is kind of hard to like think on the spot of what to say, especially with the technical language of the rules of evidence. So I would definitely recommend kind of like getting refreshed with those and knowing what those say. Witnesses, I like the witnesses, but I feel like you guys could add a bit more personality to your characters just to kind of keep us engaged. Since it is a Zoom trial, it does kind of get hard to really like stay focused and stay involved in the case. So just adding some personality to really keep like interest up, I think would be a good idea. And then themes was the last thing. I only heard one theme. I think it was from the prosecution that like she didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. Try to work that in through your directs just so like your whole case in chief is more cohesive. And then defense, I don't know that I heard a theme on your side, so I would try to come up with one that you can incorporate throughout your case. But I also got into really specific comments in my ballot, so I'm gonna like let you guys read that, and I'll also drop my email in the chat in case anyone wants to follow up.
Hi guys, again, like I said, my name's Sloan Lansdale. I did mock trial for 3 years at Montgomery County, and then I did all 4 years of UK mock trial. I was their president last year. Now I'm a graduate student at the University of Maryland. Sadly, the graduate school version of mock trial is called law school, so not gonna do that. But this was great. So I really have to echo everything that Najani and Sydney said. I agree with it wholeheartedly. Some other things, I didn't score you guys. I was just presiding, but I did have a comment sheet that you'll have access to. So that's like the whole time what I was doing. I didn't have to worry about score. So I feel like I gave pretty thorough comments as well. For the defense specifically, I think you need to have a more cohesive story. So it really felt like you were just trying to poke holes in what the prosecution is doing. But at least from what I heard today, it feels like you all have evidence to have your own cohesive story, especially about the timeline. When I heard that like the timeline didn't fit in the opening, I was really excited to hear more about that. And then it was barely touched on in your actual case in chief. And I think that can be a really strong point. And the little theme I put in my comments was, if the timeline doesn't fit, you must acquit. So, but I think just generally having like a clear story of like, this is where she was, what she was doing. She wasn't here at this other place committing this crime is a really like powerful alternative. And I think you should bulk that up more. With objections as well, you have to object to those text messages. It's a private number. She doesn't use her real name. There's no way that you can, her phone is white. There's no way that you can tie those text messages to your client. Why are we letting those in? Crosses, some of the crosses didn't have close-ended questions. That is essential. You should always be suggesting an answer, and you should always know exactly what your witness is going to say on cross-examination. They should never be able to give an answer that you weren't expecting and you weren't prepared for. And if they do, that's on you for giving them an out. And I'm not, So some questions that I have, you all work with this case for so long. And because everyone has the same witnesses and they're kind of working on the same facts and they're running the same charge, you all know this case so thoroughly, and I don't, and your other judges won't. And so I still had some questions. Why is she giving, why is she giving her customers these code names? I would imagine a drug dealer wouldn't give you like their real name, but why doesn't she know her customers' real names? Or why is she giving them nicknames? Who called the cops? Where did the cops show up? Who called them? Because the victim didn't, the eyewitnesses didn't, the person that was the robber definitely didn't. How did the police show up? I also think some things just like weren't very effective, like Grant. That whole thing between Grant and Scott, I think really pulled away from the real point. If he does something wrong with this case, I want to know about it. But one case where he made a mistake, I don't think is really relevant, even though he is a witness. He's not on trial here. And it also made Sawyer Scott come off as a really biased witness. Like he had a vendetta out for this police officer and would say anything to get him in trouble. And I don't think that helps your case. Also, let's just talk about kind of the elephant in the room. This case is about marijuana. It's about drugs, and it has drug dealers and drug users as witnesses. And you all need to be a little bit more casual as the witnesses about how you address that. You only called it marijuana, which is not what normal people do. You need to call it weed. Like the attorneys call it marijuana across the board. The police officer call it marijuana. But if you're a drug user, you're not calling it marijuana. You're calling it weed. You're also saying that you smoke marijuana. You don't use it. Using something makes it sound like you're shooting up, which is not what you do. And it doesn't make you sound like you know what you're talking about. Also, an ounce is a lot of weed. And it's an expensive amount. It's like $300. I know this because I live in DC and it is legal here. And for no other reason do I know this information. She's not buying that at a party. She's not buying that for fun. She's not buying that because she's a casual user. That's owning that amount will get you probably possession with intent to distribute because it's a lot. So we need to kind of refocus how we're addressing such a central part of this case to make it sound like these witnesses actually know what they're talking about. And I think it'll add a lot of realism to do that. Other than that, I think that's the biggest thing, was like, there are these drug dealers and drug users, and they just felt really tight about it. And I know it's because you're high schoolers and you're good kids and you haven't experienced this, and that's fine, but you're playing people that like this is their experience and this is their life. So other than that, I think most things are in my comments, and I will also put my email in the chat if you want to ask me any more. Especially if you want to ask me about like any rulings, because
Hey Sloan, I think you're frozen. Um, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask me, Najoni or Sloan or anything before we break for lunch? Okay.
I just want to take a second and say thank you guys for volunteering your time to do this. It's a great learning experience for these kids, as I'm sure you guys know, going through it yourself, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
I always remember loving the UK tournament when I was in high school, like getting to come to UK and compete. So I totally understand how fun and like great experience it can be. But I hope you guys have a good rest of the tournament.
Thank you.
I think that's all, right, Sloan?
Yeah, that's it. What high schools are you all from? Because our ballots are good, so we can know where they're from now.
We're from Model Lab.
We're from Paul Blazer High School.
Paul Blazer, awesome. One of my best friends graduated from Model.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're too old now, but Model's a great school. And Paul Blazer, I know we all would hit you a lot. That's just what it's called. They don't rate. So 2 awesome programs. It's great to see what you all are doing now.
I would add to if anyone's a senior and graduating soon and come to UK, if you're interested in the UK mock trial team, you can also email me or Sydney and we can get you in contact with somebody. Or if you just have questions, feel free to email us.
Awesome. All right, guys, it was super fun watching you. Have a good lunch.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Yes, that's same feeling. Oh, also,
They're so cute. Oh, what were you saying?
Oh, just a heads up. Apparently, after I totally forgot this, after we're done like finishing ballots and stuff, we're supposed to tell someone to go back to the main room and like let Robbie know that we're done. Because he came over and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, we're going through comments." And he's like, "Really? Have your ballots been submitted?" And I was